So many times I've told my vocation story, and it's not short because I'm not young. But if I were to narrow my vocation story down to basically three major moments in my life. When I was very young, when I was 8 years old, a very tragic thing happened to my family and to myself, and we lost my brother Joseph. So he was 2 months old, and there's something called sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, and we lost him, which was devastating to my family, and absolutely, one of the hardest things you could possibly imagine for people to go through, for a family to go through. And in that tragedy, in that terrible situation, which just was devastating to me as an 8-year-old boy, I didn't know what to do. My parents were obviously devastated, and so was everybody else around us. And we went away for the day and came back home. And when we came back home, I remember walking into the house, and it was just kind of a lot of chaos. And as an 8-year-old boy, that's really scary. I went into the living room on the left side. I remember it very vividly because I sat down, and there were like 7 or 8 priests in there with my brothers and sisters. And they were all just kind of sitting there talking to the family and the children of the family. My parents were off talking to the pastor. And I remember sitting down on the couch, and I had a priest on my left and a priest on my right. And they had these game books, like Connect the Dots and all this kind of stuff, crossword puzzles. And they started just talking to me, not just distracting me, but kind of there were this calming presence. And I don't know what it is they said exactly, and I wish I did, because I wish someday, or I hope someday, that I can bring that kind of calm and peace to people, to a family, to an individual that they brought to me and to my family. Because the priests really were the ones who kind of brought a calm and brought us all together as a family. So that was hugely impactful for me. That was an impressive thing to me. I saw these guys in a new way. As a kid, I was only 8. As a kid, I had seen priests as someone who just didn't, who said the Mass and things like that. But now I could really connect with them on a different level, and I kind of had this incredible respect and love for them. The second thing in my life that was hugely influential is when I was in college, my father got sick. He got cancer, and it seemed that he was going to, it was very possible that he was going to die, which is really, really difficult to face and to deal with. And he went off to Medjugorje, and the whole family just was drawn into prayer, and he had a healing. He came home from Medjugorje, and he went from having this terrible lung cancer to being healed and to being okay. And that was in 2000 and 2001 that all of this was going on. And it's 2019, and he's still with us, and it's a huge blessing to me. But that was hugely impactful in my life too, because after he went, he brought us all as a family, and I got back to prayer. When I had gone to college, I had never gone away from the church. I had never gone away from prayer, but I went back there, and I had confession. I received the Eucharist every day I was there. I prayed the Rosary every day I was there, multiple times, and I was always, just in a place of a depth of prayer and just peace, and I was able to reconnect with the old me, I guess, and get really back into my prayer life. It was very, very, another very impactful situation in my life, and so after I came back from Medjugorje a couple years later, I got a job teaching theology at Catholic Memorial School, and a couple years into that, I realized that it was drawing me into making me want to become a better person. If I'm going to stand in front of a bunch of students and tell them about prayer and tell them about the Christian life and the moral Christian life and all that, I better be living it. And so it drew me deeper and deeper into that life, and into wanting to be better, wanting to depthen my holiness, my own holiness, so I could try to be a positive influence on other people's lives, and that kind of a thing. And so I continued to grow in that way. And then finally, that led me to a point where I went to Hanover, and I was working with the parish there, and I was working especially with the Life Teen program. And I was at Mass one day, and this is after the first year. I had only been there for a year. And this was the most impactful thing that's ever happened to me. I was sitting in the congregation, and the priest, Father Chris Hickey, was consecrating the Eucharist. And when he elevated the host, when he elevated the Eucharist, I remember very, very clearly kneeling there and looking and saying or hearing or feeling, I'm supposed to be there, not here. I'm supposed to be doing that. It was the clearest, for someone who has been struggling with what they're supposed to do, I had a restlessness from the time I was about 30, and this was when I was 33. And for those 3 years, I had this restlessness. And in that moment, when he elevated that Eucharist, and I looked, and I was sitting there in prayer, I knew that's where I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. It's very, very difficult to explain, but it was this just blessed moment that I had of clarity, and I just knew that I was supposed to be, I was supposed to go to seminary. I was supposed to enter into that and open myself up to that and see where God was going to take me. And, a couple months ago, he took me exactly where I'm supposed to be. I've never doubted since that moment that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Doesn't mean it was easy, but I've never had a doubt. And I feel incredibly blessed. Anyone who would be thinking of becoming a priest, anybody who feels that tug or thinks it's even maybe a possibility, there are a few things that I think are kind of necessary for your own good, for your own peace of heart and mind. Because if you're anything like me, there's a restlessness that comes with that. There can be like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Am I being called? Am I not being called? It very, very rarely is it this Pauline knock you off your horse, I'm supposed to be a priest type of deal. Like I said, it took me till I was 33 to have that moment, and it was after, and this is what I would suggest, it was after a lot of prayer. From the time I was 30 to 33, I'd say, in those 3 years, I constantly was praying and asking God, what am I supposed to do? I'm teaching, I feel like I'm doing your work, I'm teaching young people about Christ, I'm trying to draw people closer to you. What is it? Why do I have restlessness? And so the only real answer, and it sounds like a easy answer, but it's not when you try to practice it, is to pray. To consistently pray and ask for the grace to know what you're supposed to do. Ask to be open to the Holy Spirit, that he might work in you and kind of pull you towards what you need to be doing. And be open to it. Going to seminary, if that's something you're called to do, is never a waste of time. Even if it's something that improves people. And discerning toward that, if that's something that you should be discerning toward, it's just a hugely positive experience. But you can't get there without prayer. So I guess I'd say pray, and also talk to people. Have conversations with people that know you well. Talk to Father Dan Hennessy and the Vocations team over there. They're awesome. They're just really easy people to talk to. No one's trying to recruit you if you're not supposed to be there. They're just trying to help people find their way, trying to find the will of God in their lives. They're true priests, so I'd trust them. And people in your family, people that know you, can be helpful. But ultimately, no matter what anyone thinks or says, the only person that's going to be able to figure out what you're supposed to do with your life is you with God, and which is why I say, and go right back to the first answer, prayer. I would tell you to pray. I would tell you in your prayer to be open to the Spirit working in you. And you might not think it. It might feel like it takes forever. It took me 33 years to figure it out, but it'll happen. God takes care of us. Call it the coolest thing about having been ordained. I remember very specifically the moment that I first elevated the Eucharist. And it was at that same church, at that same altar, that I had seen it when I had that moment of clarity. And it was an incredibly emotional moment. And now that's just one moment. Every time saying that Mass, it's almost unbelievable to have that experience. And then just the way that, I don't know, the way that people see you, the identity of the priest, having that love and that trust that I don't feel like I've earned or deserve, or that people will just give, not to me, but to the priest, is a pretty incredible feeling. And it really builds me up. And it's just, I love to preach. I love to publicly speak. I was a teacher. It's kind of one of those things where I love to talk about what I've gotten from the Scripture and have the conversation with people afterwards. But ultimately, obviously saying Mass is the center of it all. The Eucharist is the center of it all. And the fact that it isn't just an intellectual thing, but I actually feel that, is something that I couldn't have expected in the way that it is. So it's just a beautiful blessing to be able to celebrate the Eucharist, hear people's confessions, go and anoint the sick, be with people from the time that they're baptized at the very beginning of their faith life, bringing broad into this community, and then sit by them at their bedside when they die. Is just the most humbling experience that you could possibly imagine. To be able to be a part of that is just, what better life could there be?